Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Champions of Self podcast. Thank you again for always listening to these episodes. We really appreciate it. I'm your host, Ben Eden, and today I'm really excited to introduce our special guest, Chris D.T. Gordon. He was an awesome person I met recently, and I'm telling you, the blessing of networking with people and just working together, you can get a lot of blessings that way, and Chris has helped me out with a lot of things, so I'm happy to have him on today. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Ben. Thanks for having me on. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for being on this podcast today.
My pleasure.
We're going to jump right in, Chris, and hear your story. The title we've put to this podcast is what physical healing can teach us about emotional healing. And I know you have a story to share about that, and then we'll get into details. But before we do, let's hear a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Certainly. Well, I am a husband and father of 3 in Minnesota. My wife, Becky, and I are both teachers. She teaches at the public high school here in New Ulm, Minnesota. And I teach online. I teach special education for an online middle school. And we have 3 young kids, Josh, who is 11, and twins Seth and Anna, who are both 8.
Awesome.
Yes, and besides being teachers, as you could probably see behind me, I'm also a big geek. I love my my superheroes, my Star Wars, my Muppets. In fact, my son and I have really gotten into Transformers. I just got this Megatron. I never had a Megatron when I was younger, so I'm really excited to have him.
Yeah, never too late, right?
Yeah, exactly. And thank goodness for geekdom and its revivals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a runner, and I have a long-term goal of qualifying for the Boston Marathon. I generally like the 5K to half marathon distance, and I'm not really a real good marathon runner, but I have a goal that I've made for myself, and I want to get to Boston someday. And my son and I are also students of Taekwondo. And we're 1 kick away from attaining our recommended black belts. But being a 46-year-old runner, my hip flexors aren't very flexy right now. And so I'm actually thankful for the pandemic for canceling all those races I would be running otherwise, so I could work on my flexibility.
That's right.
There you go. Silver linings and all that.
That's a fantastic attitude. Take this time to prepare and become even better, so when you get back to it, you're a step ahead. I like it.
Exactly. Yeah. So other than what we're probably going to talk about, that's more or less me in a nutshell, aside from doing the nutshell joke.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for you in running. I'm telling you. I mean, soccer is my passion, but long distance running, just not for me. 5K is a stretch for me.
Soccer is how I started long distance running. I was a left mid. I was a left midfielder, and running back and forth down the field really prepped me for long distance running.
Well, the midfield is the position to do that. My goodness. I started as goalie, moved into defense, and I tried to skip through midfield, and now I'm a forward just because didn't want to do all that running.
Just jump right over that.
That's right. Okay, well, yeah, let's jump into your story. I know you have a neat story about some things that happened to you and what you've done to come through it.
Certainly. So in March 2015, I was helping my wife get our kids into the vans so she could take them to school and preschool. Well, I was flying my younger son, Seth, back and forth to the garage, and I went too far to the right and scraped my right hand on the garage wall. I didn't think too much of it. I sent them on their way, went back inside, washed it off, bandaged it, and started teaching. 3 days later, I wake up with a huge lacrosse ball size bump on my right elbow. I go into the walk-in clinic, and they say it might be bursitis. It could be something else. Just keep an eye on it, and let us know if something else happens. Well, about 12 hours later, my entire right arm was triple the size of my left arm.
Wow.
to use a comic book analogy, I look like the Incredible Hulk in mid-transformation.
Nice.
Everything from my hand all the way up to my shoulder and starting into my chest and back was red and tender and just elephantized. My wife took me to the ER. They admitted me immediately and tried to get a blood pressure reading. However, I had gone into sepsis at that point, which, if you're not aware of sepsis, it's when the body sends a chemical into the bloodstream to combat an infection. However, it also upsets your blood pressure and could be fatal itself. So I was in a bit of a sticky wicket, as they say. The doctors admitted me into the an overnight room, and in the morning, that attending doctor came up to me and said, "Mr. Gordon, we can do nothing for you here. This is beyond us. What do you want to do?" And so I told them that I wanted to be flown to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. It was 2 hours away, 2 hours to our east. And not only is it the Mayo Clinic, it's world renowned, but but Becky's parents live in Rochester. And so I knew that if our kids needed to stay someplace, if my wife and kids had to stay someplace for surely only a few days, that's the place they would go. And so they flew me in a hard light plane to Mayo, and I was admitted immediately. And then they started diagnosing me, and they had diagnosed me with necrotizing fasciitis, which is also known as flesh-eating bacteria, and started prepping me for surgery. And so before that time, when I was wheeled into surgery for the first time, the doctor sat down in front of me and started talking with me. And this is after the time they had administered some painkillers. Well, I'm not sure if you remember, Ben, the movie True Lies, when Arnold Schwarzenegger is sitting in the chair and he's drugged and he's his head's listing back and forth and he's been given a truth serum, and he tells the doctor how he's going to kill him while drugged up. That's how I was, but I didn't kill my doctor. I was all ready to go. My head's listing back and forth. And I said, let's do this. I'm ready to go. The surgeon, the surgeon, was not prepared for this. He's used to people crying and being scared and tears running down their face. And I was full of drugged confidence. So it kind of threw him off his game a little bit. But obviously not too much because I'm still alive.
Right.
So they get me into surgery, and I was then put into an induced coma for 5 days. And in that time, I had basically my skin from the back of my hand all the way through my shoulder, my chest, and my back removed. I was basically filleted. And I could show you here. Here's my right arm. Wow. Try to hold back a bit here. And then here's my side. I'm not sure if you can see with the lights, but yeah, basically I'm a discount Deadpool, if you're aware of that character. Additionally, the infection had gone so far into my right arm, my right hand, that the doctors initially thought they were going to have to amputate my right arm. But the physical therapist, or the occupational therapist who was in on the surgery, saw that I still had hand function. So they elected to remove a 15-inch by 4-inch flap of skin from my left thigh and place it on my right arm and hand. And since it's my thigh on my hand, I call this my thand.
Very nice.
Yes, I'm thinking of copywriting that.
Yeah.
But as I said, I'm a runner, and since they had cut such a large flap of skin out of my leg, they couldn't naturally, or they couldn't sew up or stitch up the wound by themselves. So they had to actually remove my vastus lateralis, which is one of my quadricep muscles,
Oh, wow.
and then install a pair of knobs, one on each side of my wound, and then also install a Jacob's ladder, which is basically like fancy shoelaces, and they would tighten the knobs over time to eventually close up the wound. And so instead of having a quad in my left leg, I have a tri.
Mm.
And so I'm all full of funny terms now. I'm basically like a balding Frankenstein's monster. Not balding, I am bald. So fast forward a little bit to Thursday night. I was put under Sunday. I woke up Thursday night, and that's when I was starting to realize, the extent of the situation. But first I had to wake up, and I thought I was at the bottom of a water slide, and I was getting covered in green liquid. What had happened was, during my coma, they had placed green fluid. It's called CT fluid, so they could see images inside me better. Well, all that was coming out of me
Wow.
as I was waking up. And I was also under the effects of ketamine, which is a very powerful painkiller. So I was hallucinating. I was at the bottom of a water slide. The nurse who came in to check on me did not appreciate my level of anger and confusion, and she ran right out of the room.
Hmm.
My brother, who flew in from Michigan to help out the family, came in, and he almost left and jumped on a plane as well.
No
But
way.
thankfully, he stayed. And so that was Thursday night, like I said. And then my wife and brother, who stayed, and my father-in-law came up to see me, and that is the beginning of my recovery process.
There you go. Now, remind me how long ago this was?
This was 5 years ago.
5 years.
Yes.
I like how you told the story because, it could be quite the memory and quite the pain and all the recovery that went through, but you found a way to insert some humor, so that's pretty neat.
It's kind of my bailiwick. It's I figure I could either bum people out or I can make them laugh, and so maybe somewhat uncomfortably, but if I come across as a Debbie Downer, I'm not going to inspire many people.
There you go. But that's what I love about this and why I wanted to bring you onto the podcast, because this is an easy segue into the emotional pain and emotional recovery side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and this is where I'll ask you, but any physical injury has an emotional side to it. Now, I'm going to guess on a few things, and then I'll have you answer.
Okay.
But where you were a soccer player and a runner and had a family and everything else, when this injury happened to you, I'm sure all sorts of thoughts could have entered your head and said, what is my family going to think of me now? What are my friends and associates going to think about me now? I don't have a quad anymore. I have a tri. How is this going to affect who I am and my abilities? And oh my goodness, am I broken? Now I have a scar and now I'm never going to be the same. All these thoughts that could really pull you down. But the fact that you're able to put some humor into it shows to me that you've done a good job on the emotional healing as well. So I wanted to hear a little from you what true thoughts you actually did have, if I was anywhere close, and tell us how you recovered on that side of things.
Well, you're absolutely right, Ben. When I started taking stock of all that had happened to me, I was basically filleted. I've been hacked apart, the upper right side of my body. I'm missing muscles out of my left leg. And the week before I had been admitted into surgery, I had run a Pi Day race, which is slightly longer than a 5K. It's 3.14 miles for all you math nerds, in under 20 minutes. And so I was a decent runner. And so to go from being a decent runner to almost dying, that could have really set me into a depression. Frankly, people were thinking I was going to have PTSD. However, I started thinking about how everyone stepped up to bat for us. People were, uh, you know, were bringing food and toys to my kids who were staying in Rochester. People were shoveling our driveways and our sidewalks because it was still, it was around winter time, winter, spring. People were watching our house for us. And so, one of my wife's friends even set up a GoFundMe account for us, which actually came into play because I ran out of sick days. And so that GoFundMe account recouped a lot of the wages I had lost. So I felt that if I were to become pessimistic or negative, that would be a total slap in the face to everyone who stepped up to help us out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started developing the attitude of gratitude and started counting all the important things, all the good things, all the seemingly insignificant things that I had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And, that, of course, included in that is your faith, my family, my friends, my job, my increasing health, but also the small things. For example, like I said, I was on a painkiller called ketamine, which is a very powerful hallucinogen. And I had thought that my pinky finger had also been amputated. And so I was thinking, oh, hey, I could have a robo pinky. I could go back in the classroom, use it as a laser pointer, I was starting to think of all the cosplay opportunities for my scars, which I actually have used for cosplay.
Nice.
And so I started thinking of all the small things that I had going for me. And that really set me up for the current attitude I have. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's like you said, my choice to look at this situation in a humorous light, not only set me up for a positive emotional response, but it also helped me develop a stronger will to rebound physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Sorry. And to put it in the terms of the emotional pain that we always talk about, I want to go back to how your injury started. You said you scratched or scraped your hand in the garage. Is that right?
On the outer garage wall.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it all started from, for the sake of this conversation, we'll say a small scratch, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then it spread up the arm, over the shoulders, through the torso a little bit. And so with emotional pain, it can definitely be something that was traumatic and abuse or of any sort, or sometimes it's a flippant remark, right? Something that starts out really small, but ends up affecting us a lot. And often that's because, well, for a myriad of reasons, but the thing we're going to talk about today is how do we recover from it? The thing that causes it, okay, it happened, it's in the past. Let's validate it and say, yeah, your emotions are real. It's scary, you're sad, you're angry, all sorts of things that are coming along. But then what can we do about it? You got to validate it, you got to be honest about it, and you got to do what's necessary. And what you're saying about the attitude of gratitude is huge. It's the element that with the emotional pain, not only everything that I just talked about, but an important thing is that we have the power to choose to recover, right? We can stay in the wallowing forever. Or once we see the light and we say, wow, now I've finally validated and understood my emotions and I have the choice to move on. Now I can, by focusing on what I do have, not what I've lost. That's awesome. Anything else that you've learned through your recovery?
You never want to say that you're, BA. It's like saying you're cool. If you ever have to say you're cool, you're not. But I look at my scars and I look at what I've gone through, and it does. I'm not going to say I'm ever BA. That's for other people to decide. I will say though, it has given me a new confidence that I can handle just about anything that comes my way and overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beauty of scars, is that yes, they sometimes are ugly, sometimes people don't want to see them, but they are proof that you are tougher than what caused the scar.
Ooh, I love
And
that.
you should always remember that.
Yeah. That's super interesting because, again, on the one hand, you could be quite ashamed, let's say, of your body now. And it's like, well, I always have to wear certain clothes to hide it. I don't want anybody to discover it. Now I can't go swimming. I can't do my normal things. And it could affect you that way. But a thought that I always like to have is that your pain doesn't have to define you, but it can refine you, right? So where you've come out of it stronger and better and more confident and all sorts of great things, what happened to you doesn't stop you. It now inspires you, as it were. So the listeners of today can say, if my emotional pain came from maybe a big regret that I have, a mistake I made, or an opportunity missed, or the way I treated somebody, or a relationship that didn't work out. Now I don't believe in myself. Whatever the case may be, that's an emotional scar. Hearing your story tells us that, wow, we can get through it. If it's still a part of us, okay, that's totally fine. Maybe it will be, but it doesn't have to stop you. It doesn't have to define you. It can inspire you and inspire a lot of other people. How have you found that in your experience? I mean, I can already see that you've inspired a lot of people with your story, but how can you speak to that? How can you tell somebody who's like, oh, but I have this scar and I really don't want anybody to see it?
That's a good question, Ben. You know, I can't speak for everyone, but I feel that as humans, we live in a society. We are societal creatures. We are social, and we we communicate through stories. And by using my scars, using my story to communicate my message, it not only empowers me, but it also empowers those who take my story to heart. And for those people who might feel ashamed about a scar they might have, try to look at it as a way to empower others. You know, by being generous with your experience, you can help someone work through their own pain and work through their own troubles. And I think that that's a hidden power of scars. It, you know, it allows us to share our pain so it helps others hurt less.
Mm. One more question that came to my mind. How would you help somebody who has the thought, yes, but I'm broken? So how would I inspire anybody?
Well, I would go back to how I first thought of all the small things in my life that I like and that I'm appreciative for. And then I would think specifically on all those people who love me. You know, there could have been people, and maybe there are, and I just haven't paid attention to it. Maybe people who don't talk to me anymore or haven't reached out because of how I look, but I don't worry about them. And it's not that
Mhm.
I'm being callous, but I have so many other people who are reaching out to me, who are talking with me, and who have helped me, that I'm giving my attention to them. So I would say lean toward those who are there, who are willing to help. There is strength in seeking help. You know, people think that if they try to seek help, they are weak. It's those who seek help who are actually strong because they're showing they have the will to improve themselves, the
Mhm.
will to move forward. And that's a lot stronger than just hiding in a hole.
Right. Yeah. So to wrap up this idea, if somebody does feel broken, a listener who feels broken for whatever reason, the best thing that comes to my mind right now is similar to a physical injury. Okay, there's an injury, it needs to be healed, and you need to do what's necessary to get it healed. If it's cleaning the wound yourself, bandaging it properly, and then you need to give it time, okay, If you need to go get professional help so they can do everything necessary, whether it's taking skin from your leg to put on your arm, something like that, then that's necessary too, and it's part of the healing process. But most of all, even when the scars are there, that feeling of being broken, it's valid what you're feeling. It's related to one of the deepest human fears, that we're not good enough. And if we're not good enough, then nobody will love us. So how can I inspire? How can I move on? How can I have a normal life again? It is possible. Will it be easy? No. Will it take some time? Probably. But it's definitely possible. So whatever you've gone through, take the time to validate those emotions, to feel those emotions, and to get whatever help necessary, even if it's a little bit scary. Sometimes the little scary steps are the exact ones that you need to take. All right, Chris, any other final thoughts?
No, I just really like how you said that the smallest steps are sometimes the scariest to take. It reminds me of the first mile I ran after I was out of the hospital, after I was discharged from all my home therapy. It was, this, put it mildly, the worst mile I've ever run. But it was also the most important because it was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And all the other miles after that have been easier. And
I like
but
that.
it's that first step that is the hardest, but it's also the most important.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
I like
always good
that.
to remember.
Thank you.
Definitely.
All right, Chris, if somebody wants to get a hold of you on social media, how can they do so?
Well, they can go to my website, which is www.chrisdtgordon.com. That's Gordon. They can also find me at Facebook and YouTube at Chris DT Gordon, and I'm on Instagram at Chris DT Gordon. They can also check out my podcast, which is called Scar Bearers, and that can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, most of the podcast sites.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Chris. And to listeners today, I hope you really enjoyed today's episode. I felt something strong as we were talking, and I hope it really helped you. Besides that, thanks for joining again on the Champions of Self podcast, and we'll talk to you later.